Hello, this is Chef John from foodwishes.com with creamy asparagus and cauliflower soup. That's right, it's very rare I make asparagus and or cauliflower soup. I mean, I say I do, but by the time I'm done adding things like cream, cheese, butter, and bacon, that's nothing more than a delicious lie. So anyway, this time I decided to actually make a real asparagus and cauliflower soup, and this is how we're going to do it. So step one, let's go ahead and put a saucepan or soup pot on medium heat. And in that, we're going to sizzle some garlic and a little bit of olive oil. And by a little bit, I mean a couple tablespoons, which is actually more than you need to saute the garlic. But that's not the only reason it's in here. Right, that olive oil is going to provide a little extra richness in what's otherwise a fat-free soup. And besides, I'm not sure who said it. It probably was me. But don't think of olive oil as fat. Think of olive oil as food, because that's what it is. But anyway, we're going to sizzle that garlic for just about a minute. We really don't want any color on it. And at that point, we're going to add about 6 cups of liquid. Now I'm going to use a combination. I had about 4 cups of chicken broth that I made the other day out of an old roast chicken carcass. And I only had about 4 cups of that. So I went ahead and added a couple cups of water. And once that's in, we'll go ahead and raise our heat to medium-high because we want to bring this up to a simmer. And while we're waiting for that to happen, let's go ahead and prep our cauliflower, which is going to be super easy because all we're going to do is break up one head. And you could just use brute force and pull it apart with your hands. But since we can pretty much use everything, I just grab a knife and hack it up like this. And once we've cut that, we can go ahead and dump that into our pot. And then all we're going to do is just simmer this cauliflower until it's completely tender. So like I said, our heat's on medium-high. And while we're waiting for that to start bubbling, we could season this up a little bit. And we're going to go with some freshly ground black pepper, a little shake of cayenne, just to stay in shape, and a big pinch of salt. And we'll go ahead and give that a stir. And then basically all we're going to do is wait for this to start simmering, and then back the heat down to medium-low, and just maintain a gentle simmer until that cauliflower is completely tender. And that's probably going to take about 15 minutes or so. So while that's happening, let's go ahead and prep our asparagus. And to do that, we're going to want to trim off those woody bottoms. And you see some chefs on television showing you this method, where you grab the bottom and you bend it like this. And they say wherever that snaps, that's where the tender part of the asparagus starts. So I gave that a try and it kind of works, except that bottom flew under my refrigerator. Oh, don't worry, I promise I'll pick that up the next time we buy a new refrigerator. So like I said, this method does kind of work, but it takes too long. You got to do one at a time. I mean, I'm busy running an international money laundering and video recipe cartel. I do not have time to snap individual spears. So I like to use a knife and trim a bunch at once, and the blade of the knife will tell you where to cut in. See, I start to cut here, and I could feel it was way too fibrous and tough. So I moved it up a little bit. Boom, tenderness. So that's my method, very fast and effective. Of course, if you're going to strain this soup, which I'm not going to, you don't really have to trim much because those fibers will be strained out. And then once the asparagus bottoms are trimmed off, we're going to cut this asparagus up in pieces. All right, the tops are pretty tender, so we can make a big cut there. Oh, and by the way, I like to save a few of these tips for garnish, so I'm going to set a few aside to blanch and use later. But anyway, we're going to continue to cut down, and the closer I get to the bottom, the smaller I like to make the cuts. Because, of course, the farther down you go, the more fibrous it gets. So we're going to go through, we're going to slice up that asparagus, and at that point, hopefully, our cauliflower is tender. And how we'll know? We will check its crushability. So if you can take a wooden spoon and kind of smash that cauliflower against the side of the pan, and it basically just falls apart, it's done. And at that point, we can go ahead and raise our heat to high, and go ahead and dump in our asparagus, and we'll give that a stir. And please resist the temptation to dump in more liquid at this point. I know it doesn't look like there's enough, and it's going to be too thick, but it's not. Asparagus and cauliflower are almost all water, so just stir it around, move it around, and there should be enough liquid to just cover. And then all we're going to do is stand right there with our wooden spoon, and we're going to cook this for about, 5 or 6 minutes, or until that asparagus is perfectly tender, yet still green. And there's only one way to do that: fish some out and test it. And if those pieces of asparagus still have a bite to them, still have kind of an undercooked grassy flavor, let it go another minute. So I kept checking mine, and after about 5 or 6 minutes, it was perfect. And at that point, we're ready to puree. Now you can do this very carefully in a few batches in a standard blender, but if you do have one of these immersion blenders, go ahead and use it. Works absolutely perfect for this. And we want to go ahead and blend that absolutely smooth. And as you do, you're going to see it turn into one of the most beautiful green colors ever. I like all shades of green, but I find this one particularly appetizing. And then once that's been processed completely smooth, you're pretty much done, except for like the most important step, taste for seasoning. I'm pretty sure you're going to have to stir in some more salt. You've heard me say it before, one of the only ways to screw up a soup is under-season it. All right, it doesn't matter what's written on a recipe. When it comes to the final seasoning, it's up to you to massage your potage. So make sure you give it a final taste. And I know, because I've trained you well, you want to add some heavy cream here, or some creme fraiche, or some butter, or top it with bacon. But like I said, we're going to be good and keep this very light and wholesome. But anyway, once that tastes exactly how you want, we're going to go ahead and ladle that up into some warm bowls. And then we got a couple options for garnish. So you remember those tips I saved earlier? I went ahead and blanched those and cut them in little strips. And that kind of makes an interesting rustic garnish for the top. So I thought that looked pretty nice. But as I started eating the soup, which all kidding aside was quite delicious by the way, as I started eating this, I realized this was kind of a dumb garnish. Why? Because I cut them too long. You do not want a soup garnish longer than the spoon. You could put out a nostril with that, okay? So I decided to go with version 2, starring this, nasturtiums. In my opinion, the world's most beautiful edible flower, and those grow semi-wild in my backyard, so I went out and picked a few, and I scattered some of the petals over the top, and then for a little contrast, I diced up some of those extra tips, which I think just makes for a stunning presentation. But anyway, crazy, colorful garnishes aside, this soup's beauty is more than skin deep, and yes, I'm not kidding, those are totally edible, and they really don't have much of a flavor, so really just for color. However, if you taste them by themselves, they do have a little bit of a peppery watercress kind of flavor. But anyway, that's it, creamy asparagus and cauliflower soup. If you're looking for a very quick, pretty delicious, and incredibly nutritious soup, I really hope you give this a try. So head over to foodwishes.com for all the ingredient amounts and more info, as usual. And as always, enjoy.